Welcome to the FarrCast, providing you insight into Wall Street, Washington, and the world. And now here's your host, Michael Farr.
Welcome to the FarrCast. I am Michael Farr. Thanks so much for joining us again this week. It is the 6th day of February, 2025. Both of those things still come as a slight shock to me, actually. January's already gone. How about that? And I'm still practicing saying 2025. Of course, my dad was born in 1925, and he'll be 100 in October. And I visited with him. I visit with him most every day. Doing just fine. He's walking with a cane now, though. If you want to take a picture with him, he'll hold the cane behind his back because he thinks it makes him look old. That's Dad's mindset these days. World War II guy. Has a great perspective on life. I asked him about the markets the other day, and he says, "Oh, you can't pay attention to this stuff. Yeah, they just buy some stocks and forget about them." That was Dad's line. He says, "Don't worry about all this stuff. They'll be fine." Stocks are up. Wait, stocks are down. No, now stocks are up. No. Elon Musk just did something else, and now stocks are down. But wait, because now they're up. That's the age in which we live, ladies and gentlemen. That's it. Mahaffee's coming on today. We're going to hear what he thinks is going on in Washington, D.C., and whether we're going to get a continuing resolution on this debt limit that's coming up yet again. Will it get through a Congress that can't seem to agree? What's going on in Panama? What's going on in South America? Marco Rubio's in South America trying to figure out what happens with the fallout of the shutdown of USAID, big government aid agency operating around the world. All intents and purposes is not operating anywhere right now. Not an easy out. And there doesn't seem to be a great hue and cry, oddly. We'll see what happens there. So we're going to see what Mahaffee says, and then Greg Valliere in our third segment today. Greg Valliere, absolutely awesome in understanding Washington and the politics, and he spends time on Capitol Hills, and people whisper to him, so we'll hear what they're whispering. But first, the great Jim Iuorio with us from Chicago, the voice of the Chicago Exchange, one of the nicest and smartest guys we ever get to talk to. Jim had us focused on 6,050 on the S&P 500. Markets are up, markets are down, earnings are coming in okay, but forecasts are coming in a little bit cautious going forward. We're seeing operating trouble, and international multinational companies are having difficulty with that dollar conversion. That strong dollar really impacts a lot of those earnings. Jim, good morning and welcome back to the FarrCast.
Thank you for having me, Michael. I think it's interesting what you said about Donald Trump and Elon Musk causing volatility. That's what I took from those words you were saying. So that's
close enough.
Yeah, it's weird. Okay, so it's weird coming from the highest office that he can just come out and just cause all this volatility in equity markets. But at the end of the day, I actually think bear markets and sharp corrections are born of extra complacency. When you have a guy like Donald Trump as president, that complacency can never be there. So it's funny is that I'm not for this. I'm not for the president calling volatility in equity markets. I don't want anyone to think that I'm saying that. However, we could be getting a stronger equity market in the long term because we are reminding people that there are risks. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
I kind of like it. In fact, I just wrote a note that I can share in my 8:30 call with everybody in my company. Every morning we have an 8:30 call, all hands on deck. It's a video call where I kind of review what's been going on overnight and the different conversations I've had with clients. I hope to arm a lot of our client portfolio managers with different things to say to clients. And I wrote that one down because that's what I'm going to share with them this morning. I think it's an excellent point. When complacency builds, you're subject to big shocks. You begin to think everything's fine and it's going to be fine forever. And boy, that's always dangerous. I did an interview the other day too, where I just keep pointing out emotion is what will ruin your investment returns. We had an investment committee meeting this week for this hospital. It's well over $1 billion. Jenny Harrington is on this, is vice chairman of this committee. I'm the chairman. She's going to take over as chairman as I go off
Oh,
the board
she's
in June.
awesome. Love
Isn't
her.
she great? I
Yeah,
think
she
she's,
really is.
yeah, she's terrific. Very, and she's brilliant. You know, she really is brilliant. So, and she comes on the FarrCast from time to time. She's great. I said, you know, the job of this investment committee isn't to figure out whether the market's high or the market's low. It isn't to figure out if we should be doing something based on market conditions. It is to plot out a strategy for this particular institution over a long period of time. What's the appropriate amount of risk? And then don't make emotional decisions. Don't make market-based decisions. Stick with that discipline, that long-term view, and keep us out of it. The greatest risk to most institutional portfolios is the investment committee, period. What do you think?
Love that, by the way, because emotion is the enemy. The emotion always is the enemy. And, you know, when that's a Warren Buffett thing, and I have respect for Warren Buffett as an investor. I think he's done some odd things in other parts, but you know what he says: when everybody else is selling, you're buying. When there's blood in the streets, and I like that quite a bit. Let's talk about the market. You just said, by the way, too, in the emotion. Let's take emotion out of it because I think it's an interesting thing right now. The market should be trading sideways. There are things back and forth. Like even if we believe we are going from what I believe was bad economic policy to good economic policy, this is one of the biggest and most stark changes from one administration to the other in our lifetime. I think, unless I have this recency bias, but I don't believe that's true. So the market should be trading sideways. The fact that it's not going lower on this transformation, to me, is actually a sign of some strength. There is one wild card in the whole thing, too, that we're talking about longer term investing, too. The question is, do you believe that Jerome Powell would love to run 2.5 to 2.8% inflation, despite what he says about 2% inflation for the next 2 years? I think the answer to that is yes. I think he wants higher inflation. So in that respect, you kind of have to be long stocks. You have to be long metals, and I'm long a lot of metals, as you know. But to your point, yeah, emotion will kill you. You have to be cold and calculating.
Okay, to your point, we're going sideways now. People still have a fairly, I think, optimistic view of everything going to be fine. Everything going to be fine. Everything going to be volatile, but everything going to be fine. Trump still seems to be in a honeymoon phase here. People in Washington, I was there last week on Capitol Hill. I was in the Capitol building. They're still kind of scared of him. People have their private opinions where they'll take shots at him, but publicly, nobody is willing to step out and say anything in D.C. But what happens when they hit this debt ceiling? What happens when he says that one more thing that somehow really doesn't work? He backed off of those 25% tariffs pretty fast. Now, maybe he sort of got some concessions, but they felt like newspaper concessions rather than anything particularly material. You know, so I'm saying, are we still whistling past the Trump volatility graveyard just because you know he's going to do something that could be material, right?
Yes, but here's the thing. Why does everybody listen to everything he said? That the tariff.
He's the president of the United States, for God's sake.
He's a non-traditional president, particularly when it comes to the conveying of ideas that he has. If it pops into his head, he says it. It's and like Monday, the tariff tantrum. The dollar goes screaming higher. The stocks are a 1.5% lower. Of course, they're going to get. Even I started to fall into it, like you said before. The emotions of Donald Trump. It's crazy, but I want to get to a point where we start just kind of ignoring what he says and focus more on the actions that he does, which, by the way, the actions always seem relatively reasonable after he says some crazy things. But back to that tariff tantrum, you saw what happened with the Mexican peso and the Canadian dollar versus the US dollar. There is no question that the market is saying that we have the leverage in this fight. You mentioned something about people not as willing to say to come out against Donald Trump. This is a pretty much of a removal from 2016, where everybody felt free to bash him all the time. Now people are like, wow, he got a lot of votes. Seems like the people really like what he's trying to say. And of course, now as far as the debt ceiling goes, if the Doge thing is, if they're really cutting $1 billion a day in spending, which I know this is just, they're throwing chairs off the Titanic at this point. But if you are changing the course of the Titanic, I hope that people celebrate that and they vote to increase the debt ceiling, because we might need that in the short term. If they don't, great, shut down the government. It literally is about shutting down 2 to 3% of total government in this country. If you shut it down, I'm perfectly fine with that too. I call that a start.
What happens when grocery prices go higher. What happens when the consumer starts to feel more of a pinch? The president, when asked about that, said, the American people know that this could be a tough time here for a while. We'll suffer a little pain, and then we're going to get to a better place. I'm not sure the American people know that, or that they've signed off on it. You?
Well, it's one thing to talk about feeling a little pain, and it's certainly another thing to feel the pain. So we have midterms coming up in just over a year and a half. That to me is the hugest wild card in the whole thing. Javier Milei had a runway in Argentina. People did experience pain the first year, and then it got much better the second year. I think that it is a messaging thing, and the Republicans, in my opinion, have always been awful at messaging. But if they can get the message out that this is the only possible way to get relief on grocery prices, to get higher wages, is to cut taxes now, which might increase deficits, despite what Doge is doing, for 2026 to be the beneficiary of that. So this is difficult. So hopefully we'll stick this landing, but it's not going to be easy.
And if you do cut those taxes, and if you do those things, and if you do increase that deficit, that's inflationary. That keeps more money in the system, and we've got prices going higher, which we know from these tariffs. And is Jay Powell going to have to do something? I mean, really, it's a complicated situation. But one thing you said, Jim, that I've learned at this age, Jim's a little younger than I, but he's not a hell of a lot younger.
Not a lot.
Yes. And we're both very healthy. We're both very healthy. But when you go to the doctor and they say, here's a little pinch, or you're going to feel some pressure. Oh my God.
That's a lot.
Yeah, a little pain. No, those providers, they tend to understate.
Can I add something here real quick, Michael, too? Sometimes I feel some guilt, guys like you and I talking about, yes, we're going to have to feel some pain, but it's for the greater good. And you and I aren't going to feel the pain. And I just want that to be out there, that I understand that it's the people who've been living on the fringes who I think have been victimized by the government. Yes, they're the ones who are going to feel the pain. I think it'd be better for them in the long run, but it's hard to say it. And I feel like it's I don't know. I hope that people don't look at us and be like, yeah, you two aren't going to feel any pain, because they're right.
They're right. No, we just get irritated.
Yeah.
We just get irritated. I go in and see Honey Crisp apples at Fresh Market for $2.40 each and think, I'm not paying $2.40 for an apple.
Yes.
That's stupid. It pisses me off. I worked for my money. I earned my money. I didn't have it. I save it. And I'm not spending $2.40 on a stupid apple. Well, I'm sorry. Would it make any difference in God's world if I spent $2.40? No. It's just so, but there are principles of things, but there are people who cannot afford those apples. There are people for whom these things, and I recognize that. And this is why we say, because I used to be one of those people. I was one of those people for a long time. You raised those gas prices, you did this or that. I had no flexibility. I had nowhere else to go, and I didn't have any extra, money left in the account. It just wasn't there. The most vulnerable economically suffer most from inflation and suffer from these economic policies. The great news here, 4% unemployment means most everybody who wants a job has a job. Thank God. Good. So we've got earnings, and the earnings have over past years increased. You've got some flexibility, but Jim and I both know that healthcare costs are going up. Jim and I both go to the grocery store. Jim owns a restaurant, Brant's of Palestine, Palatine.
Jeez.
Where is it? Are you going to be on that Palestinian Riviera?
Palatine. Yes, no, it's
Palatine.
in Gaza. Right.
Brant's, the best burger in the world, but he has input costs. And, I don't know, have you taken omelets off the menu? Because those egg prices are killer right now, right?
My wife, this almost caused a divorce. Look, I eat about 3 or 4 eggs a day. I have since I was about 6 years old. My wife said to me the other day, you might have to rethink your diet. I'm like, I'm not rethinking my diet. I'll sneak eggs is what I'll do. I'll take my slush fund of money and buy a couple dozen and keep them in the backyard. It's the winter. They'll be fine. I'm not stopping eating eggs, but it is absurd, the egg prices too. I hope that passes to one of the perfect foods. It should be a staple of our diet.
Did you see that just outside of Washington, D.C., there was a truckload, 100,000 eggs that was hijacked? Can you see Don Corleone going, I got some eggs here for you. I think they fell off of the truck,
Hey, don't ask where they came from. You'll be fine.
Maybe you could do me a favor, just a small favor from time to time. All right.
Yes.
Jim, advice to Fred and Ethel, I got to go.
So I don't think there's anything to truly worry about yet in the equity markets. They're trading sideways. To me, that's a flex with all that's going on. I think as the months go on and we start to trade a little higher in the S&P, we'll get back to that animal spirits. The caveat I have is that the Mag 7 stocks and the biggest stocks too, I don't think their leadership is going to be as clear cut as it has been before. And the rotation from those to other names might be a little inelegant and rocky along the way. But other than that, I don't see huge problems with equity markets. I prefer things like platinum, palladium, gold, Bitcoin, copper, the stuff that's going to do well in a 2.6, 2.7% inflation environment. But I think stocks are fine as well.
Those are things that Jim prefers. They're not recommendations to buy or sell any security or anything for your portfolio. Jim does for Jim, and he's very, very clear about it. Correct, Jim?
That is correct. I make no recommendations. I don't know the depths of your pockets or your risk tolerance. I'm talking about what I'm doing.
Yeah. Jim Iuorio is a partner at TJM Institutional Services, our great friend, one of the best guys I ever get to talk to. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, brother. Good to see you.
We're coming back with Mahaffee. Please stay with us.
Thanks for being with us this week. Now it's time to go to our political analyst, Dan Mahaffee, and your host, Michael Farr.
Welcome back. Joining me now, as he does every week in Season 8, Dan Mahaffee, president of the Dr. Scholl Foundation, the Eisenhower Fellow at the Center for the Study of the Presidency and Congress, a Washington, D.C. think tank, and the senior political analyst on the FarrCast. Welcome back, Dan.
Thank you, Michael. Great, as always, to be talking with you. Again, as you said, the common refrain, what will we talk about politics? What about this week? How are we
going to find something new each week?
What are we going to fill this segment with?
Can't imagine how we're going to come up with something. All right, Dan. I was in Washington last week, of course. I got to talk to a whole bunch of people. And Dan, I want to start with the refrain that I heard, which was, oh my God, he's doing everything all at once, and pretty much everything he said he was going to do, and he's getting a lot of it done. And some people said, some of the Democrats and some of the Republicans said this is awful and it's ridiculous, but they sort of sounded like they weren't going to say that out loud. Everybody seemed a little intimidated, a little scared. They don't want to become the focus point of President Trump right now. They were talking about Elon Musk, what he was doing, the different appointments that are getting through the Senate, and the confirmations that are coming through that seem to be surprising to folks. And what one senior political person, said was, he's going to get them all. He's going to get them all. Every one of his nominees is going to get through. Dan, what do you think? And what's going on in Washington? And is that the temperature you're sensing too?
Yes, look, they are feeling the wind at their backs. They are translating what they saw as electoral success.
The administration,
the
Trump administration feel the wind at their backs. Okay.
Momentum, the Trump administration sees themselves moving forward on a whole laundry list of things that he said he was going to do. He stated what he was going to do. And I think he's being very clear about how he wants to use these things, say tariffs or other executive orders he has, as negotiating tools or ways to move quickly on getting his policies across. And then, as you said, the nominees, the personnel, he's putting his team in place. He doesn't want the forces that he saw in the past as either restraining him or trying to keep him from getting his agenda directly. So he's largely put in the team he's won. And I think you see that in the way these economic decisions are made, or even as you see how crisis response was handled with the tragedy near the Reagan National Airport.
It seems like there's a bit of a ready, shoot, aim approach to some of President Trump's policies, i.e. the 25% tariffs that were almost gone within 48 hours, with some concessions Seemingly kind of headline concessions, which may or may not materialize, can't be probably measured that closely. But they said uncle, and that's good enough for the president. I don't know. Am I misreading that, Dan?
Yeah, I don't think you're misreading it, and I'm also going to have to start to put together the like point back to the greatest hits of the first term for President Trump, because you saw that cycle in many ways where announcements would be made, they would be used as a way to either get negotiating leverage. Again, he's always looking for that deal, this idea that he could either look for ways to get Canada or Mexico to change some of these policies, or, will there actually be these 10,000 Mexican troops on their side of the border? Those are things he sees as getting wins from this. And I think he's going to continue to see these tariffs and these tools being short-term bargaining chips, and that you're going to see them back and forth. And it's again this cycle of, and I don't want to say that they take credit for solving the crisis they created, but there is not caring so much about the short-term consequences, that back and forth, or the heartburn that the traditional establishment might get if they think they're going towards that goal. In this case, the border security measures they want.
Does this policy run into a wall with the public, with the voting public at some point? The president suggested after the tariffs were imposed, yes, this will cause some pain in the short term, but everybody understands that, and the long-term results are going to be worth it, and everybody knows that. I don't think people necessarily know that prices are going up at Walmart in a significant way. I don't think that they're ready for that yet, and I'm not sure typically in politics that anybody stays too popular when prices are on the rise at Walmart and in the grocery store. Am I misreading it, or does President Trump have that sort of loyal following who will say, we'll pay higher prices at all of these places, Mr. President, as long as you assure us that we're going to get to the right place for America in the future?
Yeah, look, we're about to find out how far you can get with a message of it's patriotic to pay more. I don't think that has resonated in the past, but we're about to see it in real time, particularly as some of these tariff negotiations get more heated, and that rhetoric of the pain is worth it, the pain is necessary to bring back manufacturing, or the pain is necessary for national security. So let's see that unfold. I don't think your average voter, one, is expecting that. The voter who wanted cheaper energy, cheaper eggs, cheaper groceries, all of the above, they're not expecting that. I also think the average voter who wasn't really paying attention to the election, how long will they be able to tune out or get through the flurry of activity or all the attention that the administration is getting now? Was the administration benefiting from the fact that they weren't constantly on the news every night, all these things? Is there going to be a cost to that if some of these policies do become more unpopular, or you do feel that pain in the wallet?
How does this play out, Dan? I mean, I'm still seeing this funding of the government that runs out here in the not too distant future that needs a CR, and some Republicans are already saying, no, we can't do that. Do you think that they will get the debt limit raised, or whether we'll have another CR? And I always bet on a CR because, I'm sorry, continuing resolution, ladies and gentlemen,
Yeah.
continuing resolution is a CR. That just basically moves the goalposts a little bit further, just kicks the can down the field a bit without doing too much about it. But there are Republicans now who don't even want to do that. What happens here?
Yeah, Michael, same cycle I think we've had all these times. So just ask me for the contours of a solution on March 14th. That's when we'll be right up against the deadline. I think, as you say, the CR, the solution like that. You do see an announcement that Lindsey Graham in the Senate, they're going to start moving though on some kind of budget plan. That's kind of jumping the gun on the House. Speaker Johnson was also speaking to the Treasury Secretary today about what could be afforded necessarily in tax cuts, but I'm sure some of these deadlines also came up in those discussions, so they're aware of them. But if the deadline is March 15th, Michael, ask me on March 14th. That's the typical pattern.
Well, that's an experienced Washington voice. Let's keep moving here. So all of these appointees get confirmed, nominees?
Yeah, I think the momentum is there. If you couldn't get the opposition at this point, barring some 11th hour revelation on any of these, I don't think you see them. JD Vance might need to keep the seat heaters on if he needs to come in for the deciding vote, but I think
Tulsi Gabbard's in. She gets in.
I think so. I think looking at this, if it wasn't going to be blocked by the people who are
Kennedy gets in
with the intel behind the scene, yes, and I think too, yes, if he's been able to secure the vote of a medical doctor, Senator Cassidy, I think he's in as well.
Kennedy's in. They all get in. Okay, let's move to what's going on in the Middle East. The new resort town of Palestine sounds the Gaza Strip sounds great. What happens there? We are seeing hostages that are released, and all of this happened as seemingly President Trump forced this to happen even before he took office. A strong hand in conjunction, I think, with the Biden administration, but it didn't happen without him. Does he get credit here? And what did you think of the meeting with Netanyahu?
I think any credit or momentum is overstepped by the comment, as you pointed out, the Gaza resort or whatever he is thinking of or saying. I don't know if people have seen it. Google the look his chief of staff, Susie Wiles, was giving him when that said. The photo is worth 1,000 words. The look of disappointment and shock combined. It's going to be an early meme, I think, of this administration. Her face when he said that about taking over Gaza. So look,
I think it's, but I mean, clearly it's only, the big problem is that you call it the Gaza Strip. If you called it the Trump Strip, on the other hand, it would be much Trumpier. That could be much better, according to President Trump. I'm not coming out, ladies and gentlemen, save the cards and letters.
America and other name changes, but Trump Strip, Gaza Strip. Look,
if you ever flew on the New York shuttle when Trump owned it, you'd get on the plane and they get off the plane and they'd say, "Have a very Trump day. Welcome to Trump." And it was the Trump shuttle. And I flew it back and forth to New York a bunch earlier in my career. But have a very Trump day. This is a guy who likes to use his name. I don't blame him. My firm was Farr, Miller in Washington. I got it. That's okay. Okay, Dan. How long does the Middle East sort of ceasefire hold? What breaks? And what's keeping you awake at night? And believe it or not, we got to go.
What keeps me awake at night is what the trajectory with Iran is, where that goes, given are the Israelis pausing right now for some future conflict with Iran perhaps seeing itself at its weakest without its proxies? Does it rush to nuclear weapons, and therefore do the Israelis in turn feel compelled to act? That's what keeps me up at night in the Middle East. And again, the ceasefire, I think, as we said last week, folks are coming home to their families. Hooray for that. But again, the Middle East is no place for optimists.
Is Iran emboldened or intimidated with Trump in office?
I think they're somewhat intimidated, but that also does empower some voices within the regime that want a deal. I think a lot of people in
the Iranian regime wants a deal, really?
I think there are elements within it. You can't say the Iranian regime and say that this is one monolith. There are so many different elements of reformers, radicals, economic reformers, autarkists. We're getting into of course, as you asked the most complex question when saying we need to go quickly, that leaves us with, perhaps another special on Iran someday, Michael. But yeah, again, final point, no place for optimism in the Middle East.
Next week, Canada, Russia, and China. We're going to do that next week. Dan, thanks so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to come back with Greg Valliere, one of my longtime Washington, D.C. friends. He ran the Washington Analytical Group for Schwab for years. He's an insider's insider, and he gets it. Can't wait to hear what he says is going on in Washington today. And what's going to happen with my good friend Jay Powell? I'm a little worried about him, too. When we come back on the FarrCast, please stay with us.
Michael Farr and the FarrCast are proud to support Heroes, Inc. Heroes supports the spouses and children of law enforcement officers and firefighters who gave their lives in the line of duty to the greater Washington, D.C. community. Their singular goal is to honor the supreme sacrifice made by these individuals by caring for their families. Heroes' work begins within 24 hours of the tragic loss and continues indefinitely. We invite you to learn more about Heroes' mission at heroes.org. We hope that you will consider supporting Heroes as they endeavor to honor those who protect us. That's heroes.org. Heroes, here for you, here for good. And now, back to the FarrCast and your host, Michael Farr.
We appreciate you listening into the FarrCast this week. And now to introduce this week's special guest, here's your host, Michael Farr.
Welcome back to the FarrCast. Terrific segments, Jim Iuorio and Dan Mahaffee. Here we are on the 6th day of February. Lots going on, as we talked about with the Euro segment. The markets are up. Wait, the markets are down. No, wait, the markets are up. And so that continues apace and probably will for the next several months anyway, as we get used to what one of my CNBC colleagues has referred to as the stream of consciousness governing process. Stream of consciousness governing process. Takes us all over the place, doesn't it? And investors are trying to get used to it. Trying to understand Washington is more important than ever, and we cover Wall Street, Washington, and the world here on the FarrCast. So joining me now, a great friend of decades now, I'm sorry to say for both our sakes, Greg Valliere, Chief U.S. Policy Strategist at AGF. He ran the policy, DC policy for Schwab and others for many years, an insider's insider. And as I mentioned earlier, people whisper to Valliere things that they don't tell other people, which is why it's always fun to talk to him and hear what the latest whisper has been. Hey, Greg Valliere, welcome back to the FarrCast, and it's great to hear your voice and be with you again.
Well, it's great to be with you. Always a lot of fun, Michael.
We always do have a lot of fun on and off the air, Greg, going back to Rukeyser days, amazingly enough. I mean, and that's way back for the listeners who don't remember who Rukeyser was. Those of you who do know how long ago that was. Greg, stream of consciousness presidency, what do you make of that? Let's start there, and then I want to go to Elon Musk getting his wings perhaps clipped a little bit, or is that just show? Start wherever you like.
Well, let me just say, I think this is a very odd way to run a railroad. By leak. If they'll leak something, they'll see who salutes it, who likes it, and if it doesn't get a good reception, they drop it. So a lot of things you're seeing from this president could be revised in the next 24 hours. They've walked back Gaza. They've walked back huge new tax hikes. They've walked back, I think, trade tariffs on Canada and others. So it's difficult to analyze an administration that keeps changing so quickly.
So we've seen them sort of walk in and walk back some of these things. And yet when I was in Washington a week and a half ago or so, and I was on Capitol Hill and I was talking with a whole bunch of these folks that make these policy decisions, there was criticism of Trump, but you could see when either side, and I mean both Republicans and Democrats, and the Democrats were more vocal about their criticism of the president, but the Republicans were criticizing too. But there was something of a glance over their shoulder to see and hope that no one was really listening. There seems to be a bit of a hesitation, if not fear, to criticize the president. Nobody wants to be the target of his attention right now. Everybody's going along. Are you sensing that? And how long does that sort of a honeymoon last for a new president?
Well, it lasts until March 14th, or a week or so before. That's when we have to do a debt ceiling vote, and the votes aren't there. And in looking at Trump, you're absolutely right. People fear him. Republicans fear him. He has the votes, I think, to get Robert F. Kennedy confirmed, Tulsi Gabbard confirmed, Kash Patel confirmed. So he's going to win almost all of the remaining cabinet battles. The Republicans don't want to take him on.
Is it fair
the
to
other
say,
point,
I'm sorry, Greg, to interrupt, but is it fair to say that these candidates are not being actually judged on their own merits, but rather the force of President Trump behind their candidacy?
It's the latter. Absolutely, it's the latter. And to complicate things, you've got, I'm sure we'll talk about Musk in a minute, but I have to make this point. The Democrats are utterly inept right now. They're adrift, and as I've been saying for the last few weeks, they have no stars and they have no agenda, and that I think will persist. At some point, somebody is going to become a star. You know, I would love to see it. Mark Kelly of Arizona. There are some other people, but right now the Democrats are totally adrift.
And I don't really get that, Greg. I mean, there are a lot of them. there are a lot of them. Can't they find one that seems to have a loud voice? There are no more Barack Obamas anywhere in the world. There's not another Bill Clinton out there. I mean, I saw Hakeem Jeffries when I was down in Washington, and I mean, he's a very nice guy, I think. I mean, I thought he seemed, most of these politicians, ladies and gentlemen, are very nice people, or at least for a 10-minute conversation, every last one of them mostly can be pretty charming, It shouldn't be a surprise there. They're politicians, folks. But he seemed very likable. Does he not have the leadership? Is there not anybody out there that can do this?
There's no agenda. I mean, your agenda cannot be let's litigate everything. Let's get good lawyers and go to court. That's not enough. There has, maybe the price of eggs could become a big issue. Who knows? But I would say right now the Democrats have to get an issue that, and maybe it's how capricious Trump is with something like Gaza. Maybe the public will start to turn on that. But right now, I look at the Democrats and just shake my head.
I like your comment about the 15th of March being a big turning point, because that could be a vote the Republicans lose. And all of a sudden, when you see the headlines of the national parks closing and everything else, and the threat of checks not going out to certain people, that catches headlines, and that could change sentiment. The president said, Greg, of course, that after tariffs, Americans knew that there would be a period of pain, but would take us to a better place if we did the right thing. I'm not sure that Americans are prepared for too much more pain at the supermarket, gas pump, or elsewhere, even though gas pump's looking okay right now. Prices at the supermarket and other places, not so much. Do you think American voters are willing to suffer much for President Trump?
No, and I think Canadians are not either. As you know, my parent company is in Toronto, and I cannot overstate the level of anger in Canada. They have been, wonderful allies of the U.S. for decades and decades, and they are now booing when the U.S. anthem is played at hockey games. A real turnabout with Canada, even though I think Trump backed down on this. The people in Canada are asking the question, why do we have to take the pain? And I think the people in the U.S. are going to start worrying about food prices once again.
So there's something of we hate America because of what America has said to us. I'm not sure. Does that translate to we hate all the Americans, or we just hate the government, or do they differentiate at all? I get self-conscious as I travel to Europe and other places around the world. And people see that, 5-6 years ago, people would look at me in cafes, on streets, and say, I'll talk to anybody, Greg, as you know, despite my limitations with various languages. And they'd say, so what do you think of your President Trump? With the emphasis on the P, on the Trump. I think, well, he's entertaining. What do you think? And they go, bah, how did you elect this? Well, okay. but they usually give Americans a pass. Do you think that's changing? Do you think we're becoming more hated than usual?
A little, but when I talk to my European friends, the basic issue that I throw at them is, look at your economies. Look at Germany right now.
Oh,
look
yeah.
at the UK. Look at France. You could make a case that Italy, of all countries, is the strongest, most stable country
Yes.
in Western Europe.
Yes.
So it really is ironic to hear them complain about us when they have their own problems.
It's one step above Greece, is the way I refer to Italy. One step
Right.
above Greece economically. Ladies and gentlemen, I love my Greek friends and my Italian friends. We're talking about your economy, and them right. Hey, let's harken back over the summer. I had one political pundit say, actually, it was George Will, who said that Joe Biden, perhaps when he withdrew from the presidency, running for the presidency, he found the one worse candidate than himself. Was there a good candidate out there? Was there a better way to do that? You've watched this for decades, Greg. Who should they have gotten? Did they stand a chance ever?
They probably didn't, because, as James Carville would say, it's the economy, stupid. It's food prices. So Kamala Harris was in a very, very difficult spot. I would say this, that God willing, we're going to live for many more years, and we can read the books that will come out about the abdication of Joe Biden. That's a scandalous story. People around him knew that he was failing, and they concealed it from the American public. I think that will be a stain for the Democrats for decades to come, the way they handle this.
I had people tell me, listen, a lot of these tariffs are going to be good because it's going to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. and it's going to create U.S. jobs. And I said, let me explain something. When you bring manufacturing back to the U.S., everything's more expensive. Our labor is a lot more expensive. Our benefits and the products at Walmart are going to go up, number one. Number two, we have 4% unemployment. That's full employment. We don't need more jobs. We need more workers. We have full employment right now. And if you create more jobs, those people trying to hire are going to have to pay more, and that will drive wage inflation. That will increase in prices at Walmart, and it will make the Federal Reserve's job harder in trying to control inflation. What do you think I've got wrong about that, Greg?
No, you nailed it. And I think strongly that the lack of labor is going to be a big, big issue. This administration doesn't get it. And I think it's not just California, which has had a tragic start to the year. I think in much of America, we still don't have enough workers. Trump has to acknowledge this.
We have to have workers, and I'm all for legal immigration, but if I've got to open my donut shop every morning and make donuts, frankly, I just need somebody in there making the donuts. Let me go back, if I may, Greg, something you said earlier. You said in talking to the Democrats and the politicians, you would not back away from the tax cuts, and yet you would stick with the theme of fiscal austerity. Those two seem contradictory. Increasing or keeping the tax cuts, that's going to cost what, $4 trillion over 10 years? It's about $400 billion a year, I think. I might be spitballing too much. Doesn't sound like fiscal austerity. Is there a contradiction there?
Not necessarily. I mean, you and I and people in the markets, I think, would agree that there is some fiscal austerity. But I think for the average American, there's a belief that the reason we got inflation last year and the year before was that we didn't control spending. So this is almost a masterclass from Trump and Musk trying to convince the public that they are really radical on spending. And they may pull it off, even though I think it's a rounding error what they'll actually cut. The American public may be saying, thankfully, we finally have people in charge who aren't wasting our money.
So, Greg, my final question, and this is always so great to talk to you, and I always learn so much when I get to talk to you. Thank you. What's keeping you awake at night now as you look at what's going on in Washington and how this new administration is unfolding?
Well, as I always say, what keeps me awake at night usually is enlarged prostate. But other than that,
Fair enough.
Other than that, Michael, I think it's geopolitics. We're not going to get a deal anytime soon with the Iranians. I worry that Russia, Ukraine stays in a stalemate. I think there's a lot of geopolitical issues that could crop up quickly, and that worries me more than anything else.
China seems to be continuing to heat up too. We're talking about Panama on the surface, but we're talking about China underneath. China's the issue in Panama, isn't it?
Yes, they are exploiting Panama, and I would tell you that in this city, in Washington, there's a bipartisan animosity toward China. It's both parties. Both parties feel that China cannot be trusted. That's an issue that's not going away.
Hey, Democrats, maybe that's the right issue you should hang on to. You certainly need one. Greg Valliere is the chief policy strategist, U.S. policy strategist for AGF Investments, and one of the smartest, nicest guys we get to talk to, and one of my great friends for many years. Greg, thank you so much for being with us.
I had a great time. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, pal. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for another FarrCast as we cover Wall Street, Washington, and the world, bringing you insiders each week so you can, along with us, better understand the world and the economy and the headlines with which we live every day. Help you sort it out. It helps me sort it out. For Harry Jennings, our producer, everybody at Hightower Advisors, and Farr Miller in Washington, thank you so much for listening, sharing us on social media. I'm grateful to each one of you. In Naples, Florida, I'm Michael Farr. I'll see you next week.
That's a wrap for this week's episode of the FarrCast. Thanks to our guests, Jim Iuorio, Dan Mahaffee, and special guest from AGF Investments, Greg Valliere. And thanks to you, our listeners, for all of your support over the past 8 years and carrying us on into 2025. Please share us with friends and colleagues as we continue to grow our audience. FarrCast is produced by Michael Farr and Harry Jennings and comes to you weekly for free on all major podcast platforms, including Spotify, TuneIn, and Apple Podcasts. Please be aware that anytime we or any of our guests mention a specific company, sector, or refer to performance in relation to an earnings report, news headline, or economic trend, it is not a recommendation to buy or sell. Review the risks and rewards of any investment with your financial advisor for what specific investment and general strategy is appropriate for you before you make any investment decision. And if we can be of assistance at Farr Miller in Washington, please reach out to me at hjennings@farrmiller.com, and I'll be happy to put you in touch with one of our investment professionals to help you navigate your financial course. We are grateful for all of your notes and comments, and we try to respond to as many as we can. Please keep the emails and messages coming. Take care, stay safe, and stay healthy. We'll be back with you next week on the FarrCast. Wall Street, Washington, and the world. Farr Miller in Washington is a group comprised of investment professionals registered with Hightower Advisors, LLC, and a SEC-registered investment advisor. Some investment professionals may also be registered with Hightower Securities, LLC, member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services are offered through Hightower Advisors, LLC. Securities are offered through Hightower Securities, LLC. All information referenced herein is from sources believed to be reliable. Farr Miller in Washington and Hightower Advisors, LLC have not independently verified the accuracy or completeness of the information contained in this podcast. Farr Miller in Washington and Hightower Advisors, LLC and any of its affiliates make no representations or warranties, expressed or implied, as to the accuracy or completeness of the information or for statements or errors or omissions or results obtained from the use of this information. Farr Miller in Washington and Hightower Advisors, LLC and any of its affiliates assume no liability for any action made or taken in reliance on or relating in any way to the information. This podcast and the materials contained herein were created for informational purposes only. The opinions expressed are solely those of the authors and do not represent those of Hightower Advisors, LLC or any of its affiliates. Farr Miller in Washington and Hightower Advisors, LLC or any of its affiliates do not provide tax or legal advice. This material was not intended or written to be used or presented in any way to any entity as tax or legal advice. Clients are urged to consult their tax and or legal advisors for related questions.